The crack sounded like a gunshot beneath the wagon. Samuel Hartwell had one heartbeat to register the sound before the entire rig lurched sideways, throwing his 8-year-old daughter Emma toward the edge of the bench. He caught her with one arm, dropping the reins with the other, both of them tumbling into the dust as the wagon crashed to a stop. "Papa!" Emma's scream pierced the afternoon heat. "I've got you, baby! I've got you!" And Samuel held her tight, his heart hammering against his ribs. The wheel. God help him. The wheel. He set Emma down carefully and crawled to examine the damage. The front left wheel had split clean through the hub, spokes splintered like kindling. The iron rim twisted at an angle that made his stomach turn. He'd heard men talk about catastrophic failures on the trail. Now he was living one. Is it bad, Papa?" Samuel looked at his daughter. Her face was flushed deep red, her breathing coming shallow and quick. The canteen was nearly empty. They were 50 miles from the nearest settlement, and he had no idea how to fix this. "It's bad, sweetheart." The admission tasted like ash in his mouth. He pulled tools from the wagon bed with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. A hammer he barely knew how to use, a saw he'd wielded maybe twice in his life, spare wood that looked nothing like what he needed. The sun beat down on his neck like a physical weight, and the horizon stretched empty in every direction. Emma sat in the wagon's shadow, her eyes too bright, her skin too hot. Heat exhaustion. He'd seen it kill men twice her size. The thought sent ice through his veins, despite the brutal temperature. Samuel knelt beside the shattered wheel and tried to remember anything his father had taught him about. Repairs. Nothing came. The shop back east had been books and accounts, not wood and iron. Sarah had known that when she married him, known it when she'd died 6 months ago, asking him to give Emma a better life out west. Some better life this was turning out to be. He picked up a spoke, tried to fit it where the old one had broken. It didn't match. Nothing matched. His hands fumbled with the pieces, sweat dripping from his forehead onto the wood, and the truth settled over him like a burial shroud. He couldn't fix this. Emma made a small sound behind him, somewhere between a whimper and a sob. Samuel closed his eyes and felt the full weight of his inadequacy crushing down. His wife had died believing he couldn't provide for their family. His neighbors back east had watched him fail with pitying eyes. And now, out here on this godforsaken trail, he was proving them all right. "Papa," Emma's voice was so small. "Are we going to be okay?" Samuel looked at his daughter, at the broken wheel, at the vast emptiness surrounding them. He opened his mouth to lie, to tell her everything would be fine. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he knelt in the dust beside the ruined wheel and whispered a prayer he wasn't sure anyone was listening to. The sun climbed higher, the shadows grew shorter, and the horizon remained empty in all directions. The wagon appeared like a mirage through the heat shimmer, clean lines cutting through the wavy air. Samuel's first thought was that he was seeing things. His second was that whoever drove it knew what they were doing. The rig moved steady and sure, everything about it speaking of competence and care. The driver was a woman. She pulled her team to a stop 20 feet away and climbed down with the efficiency of long practice. Yandaimor Shai, mid-40s, Samuel guessed. Weathered by sun and wind, but strong. She wore practical clothing and a wide-brimmed hat, and her eyes took in the situation in seconds. "Wheels gone," she said. Not a question. "Yes, ma'am." Samuel stood, painfully aware of his dust-covered clothes and helpless hands. I was trying to... Let me see the child first." The woman moved past him to Emma without waiting for permission. She knelt in the shade, felt Emma's forehead, checked her pulse at her wrist and neck. From somewhere in her wagon, she produced a canteen and a cloth. Drink slow. Sweetheart, just sips. She wet the cloth and laid it across Emma's forehead. You're going to be fine. Just too much sun too fast. Emma drank obediently, some color already returning to her cheeks. Samuel felt his throat tighten, watching a stranger do what he should have done first. Tend to his daughter before worrying about the wheel. I'm Beth Whitlock, the woman said, still focused on Emma. Heading to my sister's ranch near the settlement. Samuel Hartwell, this is Emma. I'm grateful for your help. Mrs. Whitlock. It's Widow, and I can fix your wheel. Beth stood, finally looking at him directly. If you'll help. The words hit Samuel like a physical blow. She could fix it. This capable woman who'd appeared from nowhere could repair what he couldn't, and she was offering to do it. His pride stirred, wounded and defensive, accept help from a stranger. From a woman who clearly knew more than him. But Emma made a small sound as she drank, and the choice crystallized. Pride or his daughter's life. It wasn't really a choice at all. I'd be grateful. Ma'am. The words came out rough. Whatever you need me to do. Beth nodded once, as if she'd expected nothing less. Good. Get your daughter more shade. I'll gather the tools. Samuel fashioned a better shelter using canvas from his wagon while Beth moved between the two rigs with purposeful strides. She returned carrying implements he recognized but had never used properly, laying them out on a blanket with the care of a surgeon preparing instruments. 3 hours' work, she said, examining the broken wheel. Maybe 4 in this heat. You got water for that long. Enough. If we're careful, then we'll be careful. Beth looked at him steadily. But I need you to understand something. Mr. Hartwell, proper wheel repair takes patience. You rush it. You do it wrong. And it fails again 20 miles down the road. Out here. That'll kill you both. The bluntness should have offended him. Instead, it cut through to truth. This wasn't about his ego or his pride. This was about whether Emma lived or died. I understand. How do you? Beth pulled off her hat, wiped her forehead. Amiki. Because I'm going to teach you how to do this right. Not going to do it for you while you stand there useless. You're going to learn. And you're going to remember. Because next time, I won't be here. Samuel felt something shift in his chest. She wasn't rescuing him. She was teaching him to rescue himself. I'm ready to learn. Beth studied him for a long moment, then nodded. First thing you need to know is that rushed work kills people 20 miles down the road. So we're going to take our time and do this proper. You hear me? Samuel swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am, I hear you. Beth turned back to the tools, and Samuel realized his hands had stopped shaking, not because the situation was better, but because, for the first time since the wheel broke, someone who knew what they were doing was here, someone willing to show him the way. Emma slept in the shade while Beth sorted tools. Samuel kept watch over his daughter, memorizing the rise and fall of her breathing. The color slowly returning to her cheeks, the wet cloth across her forehead was already warm from the heat. He remembered another sick bed. 6 months passed. Sarah's face pale against the pillows, her hand thin in his. The doctor's bills he couldn't pay. The neighbors bringing food because everyone knew the Hartwell shop was failing. Samuel. Sarah's voice had been barely a whisper. Promise me you'll take Emma west. Give her a better life than this. He'd promised. What else could he do? His wife was dying because they couldn't afford proper treatment. Dying because he'd failed to make the shop profitable. Dying because he wasn't man enough to provide. The least he could do was promise to try again somewhere else. The funeral had been small. The sale of the shop smaller. He'd packed what little remained and headed west with Emma, running from the pitying looks and whispered conversations, running from the constant reminder of his inadequacy. Now, 50 miles from nowhere, he'd proven that inadequacy all over again. You planning to sit there feeling sorry for yourself? Or are you ready to work? Samuel looked up to find Beth standing over him, tools in hand. Her expression wasn't unkind, but it wasn't gentle either. I know what you were doing. Saw it in your eyes when I got here. Beth sat down beside him. Close enough to speak quiet, but not so close it felt intrusive. You're carrying weight. Can see it plain as day. Wife died. Samuel nodded, not trusting his voice. Thought so. Got that look about you. That running from something look. Beth was quiet a moment. You know what you're running from? Failure. The word came out before Samuel could stop it. I failed at business. Failed at providing. Failed to save her. And now I'm failing at this too. That's so... Beth gestured at Emma. Girl's alive. You got her this far. That's not nothing. I got her to a broken wagon 50 miles from help. You got her to where help could find you. Beth stood, brushed dust from her skirts. Now the question is whether you're ready to stop running long enough to learn something. Samuel looked at her sharply. What's that supposed to mean? Means you got two choices. Mr. Hartwell, you can keep pretending you know what you're doing and keep failing at it. Chime. Or you can admit you don't know and let someone teach you. Beth's eyes were steady on his. Pride's a luxury out here. Question is whether you can afford it. The words hit like a slap, but they rang true. How many times had he fumbled with tools, pretending competence he didn't have? How many times had he nodded along when men discussed wagon, maintenance, too proud to admit he didn't understand? Emma stirred in her sleep, murmured something that sounded like, Mama, then settled again. Samuel's throat tightened. I can't afford it. He said quietly, can't afford pride. Can't afford to pretend anymore. Beth nodded, something like approval crossing her face. Good. That's the first step. She held out a tool he didn't recognize. Now come on. Time to teach you how to keep that girl alive. Samuel stood, took the tool, felt its weight in his palm. He had no idea what it was called, or how to use it. 6 months ago, that would have shamed him into silence. What is this? He asked. Beth smiled. That's a spoke shave. I'll show you how it works. She turned toward the broken wheel. And you're going to pay attention like your life depends on it. Because it does. Samuel followed her into the sun, and for the first time since Sarah died, he felt something other than shame. He felt the faint, fragile possibility of hope. The sun reached its peak and hung there like a curse. Samuel's shirt was soaked through within the first hour, sweat stinging his eyes as he tried to follow Beth's instructions. The spoke shave kept slipping in his grip, taking too much wood off in some places, not enough in others. No. Look. Beth took the tool from his hands for the third time. You're muscling it. Let the blade do the work. Smooth strokes. Even pressure. She demonstrated again. The shave gliding along the wood. Curls peeling off in perfect ribbons. When Samuel tried, the blade caught and jumped, leaving an uneven gouge. Damn it. The word escaped before he could stop it. Language, Beth said mildly, glancing toward where Emma dozed. Try again. Samuel gripped the tool tighter, concentrated harder. The spoke slipped from the vise and clattered to the ground. He dropped it again. Heat flooded his face that had nothing to do with the sun. I can't do this. Yes, you can. Beth picked up the spoke, reset it. You're just learning. Nobody's born knowing. I'm too old to learn. I was 42 when my husband taught me this. Beth's tone was matter of fact. You planning to tell me I'm too old, too? Samuel had no answer to that. He took the shave again, forced himself to slow down, to feel the resistance of the wood. This time the stroke was smoother. Not perfect, but better. There, Beth said. You're learning quick. The words penetrated the fog of his frustration. Quick. She thought he was learning quick. He looked at the spoke, at the slightly less terrible cut he'd just made, and felt something shift. Maybe he wasn't as hopeless as he thought. They worked through the afternoon, Beth patient with every fumble, every dropped tool, every moment of frustration. She showed him how to seat the spokes in the hub, how to angle them for proper tension, how to check the alignment with methods he'd never imagined. Spike. The wheels got to be true, she explained, spinning the partial assembly. Even a little wobble will work it loose over rough ground. You want it to spin smooth. Samuel watched her calloused hands make adjustments too subtle for him to see. How do you know when it's right? Feel mostly. Sound too. Beth spun it again, and Samuel heard the whisper of wood through air. Your husband taught you all this. Every bit. Beth's expression softened. Knew he didn't have long. Heart was bad. So he made sure I'd be able to take care of myself when he was gone. I'm sorry. Don't be. He gave me a gift. Beth looked at Samuel directly. Competence is love. Mr. Hartwell. Teaching someone to survive without you. That's the truest kind of caring. There is. Samuel thought of Sarah. Thought of how he'd failed to teach Emma anything useful. Failed to prepare her for a life without her mother. Another weight to carry. Hey. Beth's voice cut through his spiral. You're doing it again? Stop thinking about what you didn't do, and focus on what you're doing now. Samuel nodded, picked up the next spoke. His hands were already blistering, muscles aching from unfamiliar work. But when he seated the spoke, and it fit true, he felt a small surge of satisfaction. Emma stirred in the shade, sat up slowly. Papa. Right here, sweetheart. How you feeling? Better. She stood. Walked over on unsteady legs. Are you fixing the wagon? Mrs. Whitlock is teaching me how... Emma watched for a moment, her young face serious. You're doing good. Papa, The simple words hit harder than any of Beth's instruction. His daughter, watching him learn instead of pretend, watching him accept help instead of fumble alone. The relief in her eyes told Samuel everything he needed to know about how much his pride had cost her. Yaker Senchfa. Thank you, baby. His voice came out rough as the sun finally began its descent. Beth called a halt. That's enough for today. Wheel needs to set overnight anyway. And Samuel looked at his blistered hands, at the half-repaired wheel, at Beth's patient face. For the first time in 6 months, he felt something that might have been pride not in perfection, but in progress. The fire crackled between them. Stars brilliant overhead and air finally gone cool. Emma slept in the wagon, wrapped in blankets, her breathing deep and even. Samuel couldn't stop checking on her, the fear of the afternoon not quite faded. "She's fine," Beth said, pouring coffee from a battered pot. "Color's good, breathing steady. She'll be right as rain come morning." "I know. Just—" Samuel accepted the cup, grateful for something to do with his hands. "Today scared me." "Good. Fear keeps you careful." Beth settled back against her saddle, cup cradled in both hands. It's the cocky ones who get killed." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the fire painting shadows across their faces. Samuel found himself studying Beth in the flickering light, trying to reconcile this capable, confident woman with the story she'd told earlier. "You said your husband knew he was dying," Samuel said finally. "That why he taught you?" Beth nodded. Heart condition. Doctor said he had maybe a year. He made it 2. But only because he was stubborn." And a small smile crossed her face. "Spent that whole time teaching me everything he knew. Wagon repair, blacksmithing basics, how to read a trail, how to handle men who think a woman alone is easy prey. Sounds like a good man. The best—" Beth stared into the fire. "He knew I wouldn't have an easy time after. Widow with no children. No man to speak for her. But he also knew I was smart enough to learn if someone would teach me." She looked at Samuel. "Competence is freedom. He used to say, long as you can take care of yourself, you're beholden to no one." Samuel thought about that, about his own dependence on others, his constant need for help he couldn't repay. "I've never been competent at much." "That's so what did you do back east?" "Ran a bookshop. Tried to. Anyway." Samuel laughed without humor. "Loved books. Figured that was enough. Turned out knowing literature doesn't teach you about accounting or inventory or any of the actual business. So you failed at one thing. That make you worthless." The bluntness startled him. It wasn't just one thing. The shop failed. I couldn't afford proper care for Sarah when she got sick. The neighbors had to bring us food because I couldn't provide. And then she died asking me to give Emma a better life. And here I am, proving I can't even do that." Beth was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "You know what I hear in that story? I hear a man who loved his wife and tried his best. I hear a man who's scared of failing his daughter. I hear a man who got his family halfway across the country on grit alone." She leaned forward. You know what I don't hear? I don't hear a man who gave up." Samuel's throat tightened. Feels like giving up. Running west. Running's natural when you're hurt. Animals do it. People do it." Beth refilled both their cups. Learning to stop running. To turn and face what's chasing you? That's the trick. That's the hard part. And if what's chasing me is just the truth, that I'm not good enough. Good enough for what, for who? Beth's eyes were steady on his. "Your daughter's still breathing. You got her this far on your own. Seems to me you're good enough for the job that matters." Samuel wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe Emma's survival was enough, that keeping her alive counted for something. But the voice in his head that sounded like his father, like his neighbors, like his own worst thoughts, kept insisting he should be more, should know more, should be capable instead of fumbling. "Hey!" Beth's voice cut through his spiral. You listening to me or to that voice in your head that says you're worthless? How did you... Because I know that voice. We all do." Beth set down her cup. "After Thomas died, that voice told me I should sell the wagon. Move in with my sister. Let some man take care of me. Told me I was too old, too female, too weak to make it on my own. But you didn't listen. Oh, I listened. Listened real hard for about 3 months while I felt sorry for myself. Beth's smile was sad. Then one day I was working on a wheel one Thomas had started but didn't finish. And I realized something. The voice wasn't his. It was mine. And I could choose whether to believe it. Samuel absorbed that. You just stopped believing it. Not just took time, took proving it wrong over and over. Beth gestured at the half-repaired wheel. Every spoke you seat right. Every skill you learn. That's proof. Not that you're perfect, that you can learn. That's all competence really is, being willing to learn. IHE. The fire popped, sending sparks drifting upward. Emma shifted in her sleep, murmured something that might have been his name. Samuel thought about his daughter watching him learn today. The relief in her young eyes. She said I was doing good, he said quietly. Emma. When she woke up, she see you fumbling and pretending before. Samuel nodded. Shame, hot in his chest. Then today you gave her something better. You gave her a papa who doesn't pretend, who admits when he doesn't know and learns anyway. Beth stood, stretched. That's worth more than you think. Mr. Hartwell. She headed toward her wagon, leaving Samuel alone with the fire. He sat for a long time, turning the words over in his mind, feeling them settle into places rubbed raw by failure and grief. Maybe Beth was right. Maybe learning was enough. Maybe trying was enough. Maybe he could be enough. The second morning dawned clear and hot. Samuel woke with his back aching and his hands throbbing, the blisters from yesterday's work angry and raw. Beth was already up, checking the wheel they'd partially assembled the day before. Looks good, she said as Samuel approached. Should be able to finish it today if we're careful. If I don't mess it up, you mean... Beth gave him a look. You mess it up. We fix it. That's how learning works. They fell into the rhythm of the work, Beth guiding and Samuel following. But as the morning wore on, and the wheel took shape, Samuel felt his confidence growing. His hands remembered yesterday's lessons. The spoke shave felt less foreign. The alignment came easier. You're getting the hang of it, Beth said, approval clear in her voice. Samuel allowed himself a small smile. Maybe he was. Maybe this wasn't so impossible after all. When Beth stepped back to let him work independently on seating the final spokes, he felt ready, felt competent. That confidence lasted exactly 3 spokes. The 4th spoke required a delicate seating process Beth had emphasized the day before. Something about the angle, about checking the tension before hammering it fully home. Samuel remembered the general idea but not the specifics. And with Beth watching, with his daughter watching, with the settlement just days away, he wanted to prove himself. He rushed it. The spoke went in crooked. He hammered anyway, forcing it. Sure, he could make it work. By the time he realized his mistake, the hub was cracked. Mr. Hartwell, stop. Beth's voice was sharp enough to freeze him mid-swing. She stepped forward, examined the damage, and Samuel saw her jaw tighten. What did I tell you yesterday? To be careful? To take my time? Did you? Beth's tone was harder than he'd ever heard it. I bet. Because what I'm looking at says you got cocky and stopped listening. Shame flooded through Samuel. Hot and acidic. You thought you knew better than me. But Beth grabbed the wheel, spun it. The wobble was immediately visible. You thought 2 days made you an expert. And now we got to redo the whole damn hub because you wouldn't listen. I'm sorry, Sorry doesn't fix the wheel. Beth's eyes were cold. Sorry doesn't keep your daughter alive when this thing fails 20 miles out. I warned you. Mr. Hartwell. Warned you that rushed work kills people. But you knew better. Didn't you? The words hit like physical blows. Samuel wanted to defend himself, to explain that he'd just been trying to prove he could do it. But the crack in the hub was all the proof needed of his failure. You're right, he said quietly. I should have listened. Should have. Didn't. Beth pulled the spokes back out. Each one a condemnation. We're losing half a day on this. Maybe more. You understand what that means for your water. Samuel did. Emma appeared at the wagon's edge, her face worried. Papa, is something wrong? I made a mistake. Sweetheart, a dangerous one, Beth added, not softening her tone. One that could have gotten you both killed if I hadn't been here to catch it. Emma's eyes went wide. Will we make it to the settlement? The question hung in the air. Samuel looked at his daughter's frightened face. At Beth's stern one. At the cracked hub that proved his incompetence yet again, his throat closed up. I don't know, baby. Emma's face crumpled. She didn't cry. She was too old for that. Too brave. But the fear in her eyes was worse than tears. Papa, will we make it? Samuel opened his mouth, but no words came. Because he didn't know. Because he'd proven once again that his judgment couldn't be trusted. That his confidence was just arrogance in disguise. That he would always find a way to fail when it mattered most. Beth was already pulling the ruined hub apart. Her movements sharp with contained anger. Samuel stood useless beside his daughter, feeling the full weight of his inadequacy crushing down. He'd had one job. Learn and listen. And he'd failed at that too. Emma went back to the wagon without another word. The silence was worse than accusations. Evening came cold despite the day's heat. Samuel sat away from the fire, staring at nothing, drowning in the familiar weight of failure. Beth had spent the afternoon repairing his mistake, her disapproval a tangible presence even when she didn't speak. Emma had stayed in the wagon, too scared or too disappointed to watch. The wheel was fixed now. Tomorrow they could continue, but the damage to Samuel's fragile confidence felt permanent. He heard footsteps approaching. Beth sat down beside him without asking permission. 2 cups of coffee in her hands. She offered one. Samuel took it, grateful and ashamed in equal measure. I'm sorry, he said again. I know you are. Beth sipped her coffee, stared at the stars. Yum. You know what my husband told me when I was learning all this? When I kept making the same mistakes over and over? Samuel shook his head. He said, every master was once a disaster, who kept trying. Beth looked at him. You're a disaster right now. Mr. Hartwell, question is whether you'll keep trying. Oh, what's the point? I'll just mess up again. Probably will. Beth's agreement was matter of fact. That's how learning works. Make mistake. Fix it. Learn from it. Make different mistake next time. But Emma is fine. Scared because you're scared. But fine. Beth set down her cup. You know what scared me today? Not that you made a mistake. That you made it because you stopped trusting what I taught you. Started trusting yourself. Before you were ready. Samuel absorbed that. I wanted to prove I could do it. Aine it to whom Emma yourself. Beth leaned forward. Mr. Hartwell, You got nothing to prove. You just got things to learn. Big difference. Doesn't feel different. No, I suppose it doesn't. And Beth was quiet a moment. When Thomas died, I had to fix my first wheel alone. Made every mistake in the book. Took me 3 days for something he could have done in 4 hours. And you know what I learned? That you needed more practice. That mistakes aren't failure. Giving up is failure. Beth stood, brushed off her skirts. You made a mistake today. We fixed it. Tomorrow you'll make different mistakes. We'll fix those too. That's the process. Question is whether you can stand to be bad at something long enough to get good at it. And she started back toward the fire, then paused. Oh, and Mr. Hartwell, you're genuinely trying to learn, to be better, to keep your daughter safe. That's more than a lot of men manage. Samuel sat alone with those words, turning them over in his mind. Footsteps approached again. Lighter this time, Emma appeared out of the darkness, her small face serious in the starlight. Papa. Right here, sweetheart. She sat down beside him, took his blistered hand in both of hers. Are you okay? The question nearly broke him. His daughter, asking if he was okay when she should be the one being comforted. I made a bad mistake today. Emma. Could have put us in real danger. But Mrs. Whitlock fixed it. She shouldn't have had to. I should have listened to her. Emma was quiet for a moment, studying his face with eyes too old for 8 years. Papa, I like watching you learn. Samuel blinked. What? Back home. You always pretended you knew stuff, even when you didn't. It scared me sometimes. Emma's voice was small but steady. But out here, with Mrs. Whitlock. You don't pretend. You ask questions and you try and you mess up, and you try again. That's better. The words hit Samuel like a revelation. His daughter hadn't needed a father who knew everything. She'd needed one who was honest, who admitted when he didn't know, who kept trying despite the fumbling. I'm learning to be a better papa, he said quietly. I know. Emma leaned against his side. You're doing good. Samuel wrapped his arm around his daughter and felt something in his chest finally loosen. Not fixed, not yet, but loosening, like a wheel hub properly aligned, ready to take the weight. Beth appeared at the edge of the firelight. Got a proposition for you two. Samuel looked up. Ma'am? I'm heading to the settlement anyway. Same direction you are. Beth crossed her arms. Figure I could travel with you. Teach you trail repairs each evening. Get you to where you're going with skills to keep you there. We couldn't ask. You're not asking. I'm offering. Beth's expression softened slightly. Besides, I like teaching. Thomas would have liked it too, passing on what he taught me. Samuel felt his throat tighten. I'd be honored. Mrs. Whitlock, truly. And I promise I'll listen this time. See that you do. And Beth turned back toward the fire. Get some sleep. Long day tomorrow. Emma squeezed Samuel's hand. Papa, are we going to make it to the settlement? This time, Samuel didn't hesitate. Yes, sweetheart. We're going to make it because they weren't alone anymore, and because he'd finally learned that accepting help wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. 3 days passed in steady rhythm. Rise with the sun. Travel until midday. Heat-forced rest. Continue into evening. And each night, Beth taught. Not just wagon maintenance everything. How to read weather in clouds. How to find water from vegetation. How to maintain harnesses and check axles, and 100 other skills Samuel had been traveling without. Because Emma watched everything, her confidence growing with her father's. The fear that had haunted her eyes after the wheel broke gradually faded, replaced by something that looked almost like pride. "You're learning quick," Beth said on the 4th evening, watching Samuel properly seat a harness connection. "Real quick." Good teacher helps. Samuel tested the connection, found it solid. "Thomas taught you well." "He did." Beth stood, stretched her back. "Which reminds me, got one more lesson before we reach the settlement tomorrow." "What's that?" Beth walked to her wagon, returned with a leather bundle Samuel hadn't seen before. She unwrapped it to reveal a harness connector that had clearly seen damaged cracked wood, frayed leather, bent metal. "Broke this last month. Been meaning to fix it, but figured it'd make a good test." She handed it to Samuel. "Fix it. I'll watch. But I won't help unless you're about to do something dangerous." Samuel took the damaged piece, heart suddenly hammering. This was different from following Beth's step-by-step instruction. Thought her bad. This was her testing whether he'd actually learned anything, or just memorized her movements. Emma appeared at his elbow. "You can do it." "Papa." Samuel examined the connector from all angles, thinking through what Beth had taught him. The crack in the wood needed reinforcing. The leather could be salvaged if he worked it right. The bent metal required careful straightening. He gathered tools slowly, methodically, forcing himself not to rush. Beth settled against the wagon wheel to watch, her expression neutral. The pressure of her gaze made Samuel's hands want to shake, but he breathed through it. "Measure twice. Cut once." Beth's constant refrain. He worked the damaged wood first, remembering the proper angle for the reinforcing piece. His hands fumbled the first cut, but he caught it before going too far. Reset. Tried again. This time the piece fit snug. "Good." Beth murmured, "Keep going." The leather required soaking to make it pliable enough to work. While it softened, Samuel addressed the bent metal. Slow pressure. Let the material do the work. Don't force it. An hour passed, then 2. Emma fell asleep against the wagon, but Samuel barely noticed. He was lost in the work, in the satisfaction of feeling competence slowly build under his hands when he finally finished. The connector wasn't perfect. Beth could have done it faster, cleaner, better, but it was solid. It would hold. "Let me see." Beth took the piece, examined it from every angle, tested the joints. Samuel held his breath. "It'll do," she said finally. A smile crossed her weathered face. "More than do. Actually, this is good work. Mr. Hartwell, you're ready." The words hit harder than Samuel expected. Ready. After a lifetime of being unprepared, incompetent, always one step behind, he was ready. "Thank you," he managed, "for everything. For stopping, for teaching, for not giving up on me when I was an idiot." Beth laughed. "You weren't an idiot, just untaught." She stood, gathered her tools. "Tomorrow you reach the settlement. You'll be on your own again. But you'll have skills now. Real skills that'll keep you and Emma safe." Samuel looked at his blistered, calloused hands. Hands that had fumbled books and accounts back east. Hands that could now fix a wagon. repair a harness, maintain the tools of frontier survival. I want to pay you. He said, for your time, for the teaching. I don't have much, but no, Beth's voice was firm. You don't pay for kindness on the frontier. You pass it on. She met his eyes. Someday you're going to see someone broken down on the trail, someone scared and fumbling and out of their depth. When that happens, you stop. You teach them. That's payment enough. Samuel nodded, his throat too tight for words. Besides, Beth added, her tone lightening, buy your daughter something cool to drink when you get to town. A treat she'll remember. That's worth more than money to me. Emma stirred, woke, rubbed her eyes. Are we there yet? Tomorrow, sweetheart? Samuel pulled her into his lap. Tomorrow we'll be home. Emma looked up at him. You really think so? Papa, that will be okay. Samuel thought about everything he'd learned, about the wheel that had once seemed impossible to repair, and now spun true, about hands that had learned to be competent through patience and practice. Yes, baby, I really think so. The settlement appeared on the horizon at midday, shimmering in the heat like a promise made solid. Samuel felt Emma squeeze his hand, felt his own chest tighten with something that might have been hope. Beth pulled her wagon alongside his as they approached. This is where I split off. My sister's ranch is east of here. Already. Emma's voice was small. Can't you stay? Got my own journey to finish, sweetheart. Beth smiled. But you'll be fine. Your papa knows what he's doing now. They reached the edge of the settlement and pulled their wagons to a stop. Emma climbed down and threw her arms around Beth's waist, hugging fierce and tight. And now I nani died. Beth returned the embrace, her weathered face softening. You take care of your papa. You hear, keep him from getting too confident. I will. Emma stepped back, swiped at her eyes. Thank you for teaching him. My pleasure. Little one. Samuel shook Beth's hand, the gesture feeling insufficient for everything she'd given them. I don't know how to thank you properly. Mrs. Whitlock, you saved our lives. I taught you to save your own. Big difference. Beth glanced at the settlement. You got everything you need from here. I think so. Going to find work. Find a place for Emma and me to live. Make a proper start this time. You'll do fine. Beth climbed back into her wagon. Remember what I said about passing it on? I will. I promise. Beth nodded once, then flicked the reins. Her wagon pulled away east. Strong and steady and sure, Samuel and Emma watched until she disappeared into the heat shimmer, then turned toward the settlement together. The livery was easy to find. Samuel pulled the wagon in, began unhitching the team, with movements that were competent now, practiced. The liveryman approached, a grizzled man with sharp eyes. That's good work on that front wheel, he said, examining it. Who did the repair? I did, Samuel said, then added, with help? I was taught proper. Shows. Wheels true as any I've seen. The liveryman straightened. You looking for work? Good wheelwright's always needed in a growing town. When Samuel blinked, he'd planned to look for bookkeeping work, something close to what he knew. But the offer settled into him with unexpected rightness. I'm still learning, but I'm willing to work. Willing's enough to start. Come by tomorrow. We'll talk. After settling the horses, Samuel took Emma's hand and walked into the settlement proper. The general store had cold lemonade. He bought 2 glasses with coins that felt less heavy in his pocket than they had before. Emma drank hers slowly, savoring every sip. A.B. Papa. She looked up at him, lemonade mustache on her upper lip. Are you happy? The question surprised him. I think so, sweetheart. Are you? Yeah. Emma smiled. I'm not scared anymore. Something in Samuel's chest finally settled. Not fixed. There were still scars there. Still grief and loss that wouldn't fade quickly. But healing? Actually healing. They were walking back toward the livery when Samuel heard it. A wagon pulled to the side of the road, one wheel visibly damaged. A young man barely more than a boy knelt beside it, tools scattered around him, his face tight with frustration and fear. Samuel slowed, stopped. Emma looked up at him questioningly. Wait here a moment. Sweetheart. He approached the stranded wagon slowly. The young man looked up, hope and embarrassment warring on his face. You know anything about wheels? Mr. Samuel looked at the damage. Cracked spoke. Hub loose but not broken. Fixable. If done right, he could walk away. He'd earned that much. He and Emma were safe now. Settled. Done with other people's problems. Beth's voice echoed in his memory. You pass it on. That's how it works. I might be able to help, Samuel said, if you'll let me show you how it's done. The young man's relief was palpable. I'd be grateful. More than grateful. Samuel knelt beside the wheel, Emma hovering at his shoulder. He examined the damage, thought through the repair process Beth had taught him, then looked up at the waiting boy. First thing you need to know is that proper repair takes patience. You rush it. You do it wrong. And it fails again 20 miles down the road. The words were Beth's. The knowledge was Beth's. But the hands that reached for the tools were Samuel's own. And they were steady. 2 hours later, the wheel was fixed. The young man offered payment, but Samuel waved it off. Buy yourself something to eat at the next town, and someday, when you see someone broken down, you stop and teach them. Walking back through the settlement with Emma's hand in his, Samuel felt the last piece of something heavy finally lift away. The wheel that had broken 50 miles back had taught him more than wagon repair. It had taught him that broken things' wheels. Pride. Fear. Faith could all be mended with patience and willingness to learn. The sun was setting as they reached the livery. Samuel's hands were blistered and calloused, marked by labor and learning. Emma leaned against his side, trusting and unafraid. Somewhere to the east, Beth's wagon rolled on toward her own new beginning. Tomorrow Samuel would start work. Tomorrow he'd begin building a life here, building the competence to sustain it. Tomorrow he'd prove that the lessons had taken root. But tonight, he stood with his daughter and watched the light fade over their new home, and felt something he hadn't felt in longer than he could remember. Peace. The wheel had broken, and in its breaking, it had shown him how to be whole.